Welcome back to the Remarkable Women, Powerful Stories, the Leadership Series by Zonta International. And I thank you most sincerely for joining us today. Well, I'm so excited about today, and I'd like to welcome our almost finished her biennium of Zonta International President Sharon Langenbeck. Welcome to you, Sharon.
Thank you.
I'm Lynn Foley, Chairman of the Zonta International Leadership Development Committee, and hosting this series is one of the most exciting things I do every month. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and also pay that respect forward to any First Nations people present. Zonta International is a leading organisation globally of professionals empowering women worldwide through service and advocacy, and Zonta is now in its second century with more than 25,000 members across 64 countries. We all work together to make gender equality a worldwide reality for women and girls. So now it's my pleasure to formally introduce Sharon, who's joining me from Santa Clarita in Los Angeles, USA. So just a couple of Sharon's achievements, but we'll talk a little more about those and what's been happening for her in the last 18 months since I first spoke with Sharon as our first guest on this series. So Sharon is currently the president of Zonta International and the Zonta Foundation for Women during the biennium of 2020-2022. And of course, that ends very soon, towards the end of June for Sharon. And I know she's had a stellar career with Zonta, serving in a wide range of leadership roles on the international board and locally. Having retired in 2008 from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where she held line and project management positions and section manager of mechanical engineering, I know she has now devoted much more time to Zonta International and finding her way through those various positions to the pinnacle of those achievements of being our Zonta International president. So I'm going to leave it there because most of us who watch these recordings know of Sharon's amazing career in her engineering and I guess aeronautical engineering space, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as we proceed today, Sharon. So wow, having you back with me today is just fabulous from here in Australia. I'm in Toowoomba, Australia, and we're in the middle of an unseasonally early winter. And there you are in the beautiful summer of Los Angeles. So welcome.
Thank you, Lynn.
So you've told me many times that you dreamed about what you wish to achieve during your term as international president. You took up the reins at the very beginning of the second Zonta century, at a point when the world as we knew it changed significantly. I invite you to reflect with me on your dreams and how you're feeling as your term comes to an end.
Well, Lynn, I know in the past we've talked about how I look at our founders and how bold they were and how they felt that they could achieve gender equality in their lifetime. Here we are 100 plus years later, we have still not achieved that gender equality. And what I wanted to do this biennium was to really set the stage to where we could get gender equality in our lifetime. I think that's a stretch goal. We know the conditions of the world. We just have had a pandemic that has set us back 2 years plus. And so that is a big challenge for us, but it strengthens our commitment to getting that gender equality. And I'm so proud of the resilience of our members, our headquarters staff, everyone, to still continue with the mission given the challenges of the world. So, you know, I focused too on teamwork, and I think that was important too, given the conditions that we've been under for this biennium, is the fact that we weren't working in silos, that we were working as a team. And that teamwork allowed us to be able to pull together under the circumstances we were working with.
Yes, it's been, as we're doing a retrospective again today of your time in the role, it's really quite scary, isn't it? We've become 2 years in the pandemic and all of that in your term as international president, and all of our countries are not yet out of it. even though we might be starting to behave normally, we're still a long way away from the issues that we're seeing in health, the health issues worldwide, and then all of the social disruption. Yeah, it's fascinating, and Zonta seems to have weathered that reasonably well, perhaps. I don't know whether that's your view.
Yes, it is. You know, we have a biennial, schedule. And so we look at that and say, these are the things you need to do. Well, yes, we had that schedule, but we couldn't implement it in the same way in which we had in prior bienniums. So we were constantly looking at how to adapt. And we did. And so now we have sort of a new playbook, but hopefully never again will there be a biennium like this one from that standpoint of the pandemic.
And maybe we've increased our ability to be adaptable and flexible and all of those other words like that. I don't know, maybe we've just added that to the playbook as well. Instead of ordinary adaptability, we've gone to the highest level of that, maybe.
Right.
I'm wondering if you have some key projects and outcomes that truly warm your heart.
Well, Lynn, I have to say this Remarkable Women, Powerful Stories is one at the top of the list. I just feel that this is an opportunity for not only our members, but an opportunity to outreach to women and girls around the world. Everyone has a unique story, and listening to them, you get the inspiration, you get little things that, I hadn't thought about. And so that was just a wonderful series to kick off this biennium. Another thing that I like is the fact that we've been doing the webinars for advocacy, and it's been based on teamwork. It's been based on having the advocacy, the service, the United Nations committees, the Council of Europe, working together on those topics. And so it shows to our membership how we are working together on our committees. And then with our Resolution 2 work, where we have been looking at the organization and are we positioned well for our second century. And so that has been a big focus for our board, and to understand what is the interest of our members and where we can have the best footing for us as we continue in our second century. And one other thing I'm very proud of is that our international service projects, when the pandemic hit, they were able to adjust, to continue to work on our objectives, but to modify as necessary because of the pandemic. And so I'm very proud of our UN agencies that we work with, that they have been able to accommodate that.
So many things. And when you just run through them quickly as a summary, it's interesting, isn't it, to see. And thank you so much for the comments about the Remarkable Women series. I think, well, I'm the privileged one, I think, in that I get to meet every woman twice usually, get to know them and then have a lovely conversation and then hear the feedback from my colleagues and friends, both within Zonta and outside of Zonta, who take the opportunity to watch some of them or all of them. And yes, that effect that it has on women, sometimes it picks up your heart and causes you to move on more positively. And we all learn something. I have learned the most amazing things from each of my guests, including yourself. And you've been very special because you've been here twice.
Thank you. Yes.
So what are you most proud of? As you, I know convention is almost upon us in Hamburg. And so I'm sure you're doing a lot of reflection and being retrospective. So what's the big thing that you're proud of?
Well, I'm proud that we as an organization, we've been able to adapt to this rapidly changing world. But the thing that we also had to deal with was the uncertainty of that future. When I think back 2 years ago, it was, the pandemic. Once we get the vaccines, we'll be back to the way it was. But that constantly, that goalpost kept changing. And being able to adapt under uncertainty and that resilience, it really stands out as something that's very important to me. And another thing that I'm very proud of is that we have the statement on climate change. That was one of the things that we know everyone is affected by it, but women and girls in underdeveloped countries are especially impacted. And so having that statement, and it goes beyond just having a statement, because that statement includes actions. And for me, I can read statements, but I want to know what are the actions that go with it. How do you implement it? Because that's really where you make a difference. You can put a lot of pen to paper, but it's what do you do with it after that? And so I'm very pleased with how we have taken those statements and put actions with them. And I think it's important for our members to see that as well, because they see it. This is a message coming out, and what can they do at their local level, at their district level? Those are important things for us to communicate with our members. I'm also very excited about having our first hybrid Zonta convention. We're trying new things. And so I'm excited with what we are proposing for this convention and what our members are going to see both in person and virtually. So I'm very pleased with what we have been doing. And I feel that the work, all of the work that we've been doing this biennium has put Zonta on a stable footing for the longevity of the organization.
Absolutely. And I see that every way and every day. And that's, I think it's one of the best examples is the lead up to this convention. So for people who may be watching us today who aren't from a Zonta club somewhere in the world, the use of the Hoover app that's allowing people to discuss and talk about the convention and meet people before is the first time that's been done broadly, other than, you know, individual districts doing something themselves. And you can see that already, that engagement. And for those of us who aren't coming to Hamburg, that opportunity to dip in and out or at various time zones, they're always awkward, but that's what being a global citizen is about. Awkward time zones are just the way it is. And to be able to be part of the things that we want to be and to meet people, whether we're in Hamburg or not, I think is a really major step forward. So for me as a member, as well as someone who leads, I think it's fabulous. That's great. And the comments about climate change you made, I just follow up in the conversation. I've seen it starting to take off in my area here in Australia at area meetings most recently, where I was involved facilitating both the area meetings I was engaged in and working with the members. The theme for the whole day was about climate change and gender. And what is it? How can we roll that into advocacy? It's all about advocacy and working locally to do something about that in each of our local areas, etc. So I think that might gladden your heart as well to hear that it's taking off all the way down here in Australia as well on the basis of that statement. So what do you think you've learned about yourself as a leader and a woman? And have your perspectives changed?
Yes, I think my perspectives have changed. You know, I've been on the board prior to becoming president. I was on the board for 6 years, but it's not the same as being the president, being the ultimate leader, you know, that position. And I compare my own history with my work. I was in a for-profit company, and leading in a nonprofit and a for-profit is different. The motivations are different. And one of the things that I saw when I was thought about when I was making decisions and recommendations would be that I think there's a greater downside risk in a nonprofit than when you are in a for-profit. And that's because people join nonprofits, it's a volunteer, it's their choice. Whereas the motivation for working is different. And so seeing that in real time, it's broadened me. It's given me some different perspectives of leadership in a not-for-profit and for-profit. And I think sharing some of those differences with future leaders is important.
It's a really big shift, isn't it? And I think those of us who've moved from one to the other or backwards and forwards, we learn that sometimes the hard way, but we do learn that it's different. So just continue on that theme for a moment. What else have you learned about yourself? Is there something about yourself that you might have known or you didn't know that you've had to really rely on?
I think it's my inner strength, my commitment. You know, I joined Zonta in 1979. My commitment was to give back to the organization, and being the first Amelia Earhart Fellow, to be a president of Zonta International, it really just, it was so special to me. And I wanted to do everything that I could this biennium for Zonta. And I want to share that. It's enthusiasm to share amongst the Zonta world, but also to young women around the world about careers, about potentials, and ways in which they can have impact. So I think it's strengthened me in various ways.
Fabulous, thank you. No doubt you had the odd tough time or two, or challenges you've had to work your way through. I know our people who watch our series are really interested to see how our leaders like yourself work through those times of resilience, or when the confidence takes a bit of a hit. So have you got something there you'd like to share with me today around challenges or a tough time, and how you work through it?
Well, yes, of course. Everyone has some down moments, and I certainly had my share, especially since I had that vision coming in as president. I had watched all these prior presidents of these were the things you were going to do, and I had a different playbook. And so there were disappointments. There were things that I thought that I was missing. And when I would feel down about something or not so positive, thankfully, my husband was there for me, my family, but it was so important interacting with our headquarters staff, because they kept me going many times when, you know, oh, I'm not so sure about something or what, but no, we need these decisions made. No, we need to continue this. No, the deadline is here. And so it would pull me back up and saying, you know, I need to do this, because it was important for me not to disappoint the members of Zonta, our club presidents, our district governors, our board. It was important for me to be that light. And so that was a strength to me, was all of the members and saying, I can't be down for very long, because I have to be that model and that leader for the organization.
And that's that inner strength, isn't it? You talked a little earlier about drawing on your inner strength as well as the support. I know particularly from your husband and from those that you're close to, that just lift you up when you go, oh.
Yeah.
It's that moment, isn't it?
There's another thing that kept me going, and that was reading about the share your stories, the things that came in from the clubs, because you know, as I said, we were all facing challenges, but then being able to read what was happening in various parts of the Zonta world, that was, okay, we've got to keep going. It re-energized me. And so I so appreciate getting those share your stories, because the messages were there.
And when you're at the pinnacle of an organization, such as you have been the last 2 years, often the good stories don't sneak up fast enough, do they? Like, you know, we don't get that good feedback to get the satisfaction to know that you're making a difference. And that's lovely to know.
Yeah.
So do you think you've added any new leadership powers or gifts? Do you think you've added one to that big Sharon toolkit of leadership powers?
The thing that comes to mind is that I feel I'm a stronger spokesperson for Zonta, that having experienced what I experienced has just emphasized and you know, made me really want to get out there and be that spokesperson and really show what is needed for women and girls around the world, and what Zonta is doing, and inspiring others to join Zonta. But collectively, and that I think that's so important, to be a strong spokesperson. And I feel different today than I did 2 years ago when I took on being the role of president. I really do feel that myself, that I am a stronger spokesperson.
And that's a great power, isn't it? To be
Yes.
the spokesperson. And we spend so much time with our young women saying, you've got a spot at the table. Your opinion matters and you need to share it. Don't sit back. So it's all part of that, being a spokesperson for whatever it is we're doing. What a wonderful power to have grown in. I suspect you always had that, but you might have grown in it, or it's got tougher or something. That's fabulous.
Yes.
Way back, and it seems like way back in January 2021, you spoke with me about the importance of education in the pursuit of life in general, but particularly gender equality. How have you seen Zonta really contribute to that globally? Because you've now been on the board for across an 8-year period internationally with a global view. So how do you think Zonta's really contributed?
You know, the continuation of those education programs, they are our programs. And I think the importance of that and the visibility of those programs is so strong for Zonta. I've always viewed that education is the key to success. And not everyone is going to have the book education, but there are other means, life skills education. But we know that if a woman can move into a position of decision-making, of policy changing, it can have that lasting effect. And Zonta, by supporting our education programs, our awardees, the young women in public affairs who are dealing with talking about social issues, they have these perspectives, and we want those to grow, to become integrated into society, and for all of our awardees to take on these positions of making decisions, to changing policy, and that's where you get the lasting change. And talking to these awardees, I mean, they are always so grateful, you know, just like I was in 1977 and 1978, so grateful for the recognition. And it's important that Zonta continues with our education programs. And another aspect with education is that we have been looking with our international service projects to make sure that they're a comprehensive program, because we know that if there's an issue, it is multifaceted. And so education is included with our international programs and projects. So it's, you know, you make progress here and progress here. And so you're better served than just focusing on one issue. And I'm so pleased that we've been able to incorporate education into our international service projects, but also the recognition that we get from our own education programs and having our awardees joining Zonta and continuing to be engaged. I think they're role models, and every time that we have an awardee, they are a role model for the next generation. And that's something that is very important.
And we have so many. If we look at it across globally, with all the district awards and club awards and, you know, sometimes small amounts of money at club level, but in all of the major awards that we have in the education program, many, many young women have a lift up off the basis of some money, but also off the basis of a recognition, I think. So it is a fabulous part of Zonta, absolutely. So with that in mind, I know that one of the most special things that's happened to you in the last little while has been your trip to Peru. And I haven't heard much about this yet either, so maybe I'll be one of the first to hear. So you've travelled to Peru to visit one of Zonta's very important projects. I know you went there with Megan from headquarters and to meet our partners. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your reflections. What did you see, and what's gladdened your heart about all of that?
You know, the site visit to Peru was truly a highlight for the biennium for me. And partly because I was the one who, you know, brought it forward to vote on as a project. And having looked at the different projects back 2.5 years ago, this one was one that really stood out because it was a comprehensive program. It was involving the health, it was involving the schools. And so that just added to my the importance to me and the impact. But in the being able to visit the schools and the health centers and seeing how they were implementing our program, the students were so welcoming. I mean, they were waiting for us, and they were so happy to see us. And the confidence that they had to, when they spoke about the programs that were being implemented, the education that they were having, I was very impressed about their positivity about change, that they knew things needed to change, and they wanted to change, and they were really appreciating the program that we had. And at one of the sites, they talked about how the loudspeakers that we provided, because of COVID, they were not in the buildings. And so they were showing us how they were able to continue to be educated using what Zonta had done to provide for monies then for these loudspeakers. And so, you know, being able to see firsthand the impact that Zonta has made, but then the enthusiasm from the girls, from the boys, the adolescents. And when we went to the health centers, because they're working closely with schools, the girls are coming in for consultations for any issues they may have. And I said that one of the successes that is there is that the girls come back. They see value. If they came once and didn't come back, then maybe you'd question the value. But because they talk about how the girls come back and they want to have another appointment, they want to have some more discussion, they want to learn more, says that this program is very successful. And so I left with just, it was an amazing time, and to meet these students and the fact that they are so positive, so full of hope for change. And it was fabulous memories.
That's fabulous. And it is also good for you to be able to tell all of us as Zonta members how well it's going, because that then means that as in our Zonta clubs and other people in our communities see how important it is, and will donate funds, etc., to support projects such as the one in Peru going forward, which is a really important part of the whole education and health programs that we're engaged in. Lovely. Can I draw you on some comments, if I may, about the current state of gender equality? Because we have an amazing relationship through the Commission on the Status for Women, and it's not that long since the 2-week annual Commission on Status for Women in New York. So I wonder, with your experiences there and your experiences with Zonta as this international president, some comments from you about where we're at with this whole gender equality approach.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you know, with the pandemic, in so many ways, we've heard about the setback. Many schools were closed for a year, and the impact of that is probably greater than the 1 year that we went through. And so the challenge is really, how do we get to that gender equality, and when the horizon is not near term, the horizon is longer term, and what can we do? And we know that there is so many differences around the world. Countries are different, parts of the world, even within a country, it can be very different, very diverse. And so I think the challenge is, how do you collectively make progress? And so we do see progress, which is very positive. It makes you keep going and saying, this is what we need to do. But it is challenging to think about that long term, and how do we get to that point, because it is not here, it's far away for achieving it.
And so much of that is also about what we've all read and heard and witnessed, that disproportionate effect on women of particularly the pandemic and climate change that you referred to earlier. It seems like the really big issues that our globe is facing, or our world is facing at the moment, seem to have a disproportionate effect on women and girls, which sets back that pathway to gender equality that you and I thought we'd see in our lifetime as well.
Yes.
And as the Global Gender Gap report from the World Economic Forum keeps telling us, we're many more than 100 years away from getting that across the globe. So it's again, it's challenging, I think. So with that in mind, back in 1919, our amazing Zonta founders had that dream that led them to bring together the group of like-minded professional women, and it resulted in our organisation today. How do you believe they might react to Zonta today?
Well, I think our founders would be proud of the organization, that it is still strong in its mission, that we still have that focus on how we help women, girls gain the skills to work outside the home. That was one of the first things that they did, is how do we help women to go into the workplace? And, you know, they saw that importance of an education. And so we have the education programs. They would be very proud that we have our education programs. They also had early service projects. And so I think seeing what we are doing today internally with our education, as well as with our UN agencies, that they would be happy, they would be proud. And I think we should be proud that we are working and walking in their footsteps, that we have the commitment just like they did. And so there's a lot of similarities. And I'm sure that they're still saying, well, we need to do it as soon as possible for gender equality, and have that goal. But I think what we are doing today, that our founders would reflect and say, this is what we had in mind, and you have continued with our vision for the future.
So following on that theme, then, we've just been talking about the pandemic and the issues of the world, and Zonta clubs, and you mentioned it earlier in our conversation, Zonta clubs have had to change, move. We could use the in vogue word of pivot, if we like. We've had to do things differently, and a membership organisation, of course, is based on its clubs. How do you think clubs where there's been particularly long periods of isolation, causing them to meet virtually? So each country's been different. Some countries have had very long periods of that isolation or lockdown, and others haven't. When you look at it from your perspective, how do you think clubs have weathered that, or managed it, or in fact gone through it with brilliance?
I think the fellowship has come through, that clubs are you know, that the connection of fellowship and care for each other has been very important to figuring out how do we help each other. We have different circumstances, as you say, around the world. Our clubs have encountered different things. And so it's important to emphasize that fellowship and care and concern within the organization, but we also the care and concern of women and girls in their community, because we know that, like, the violence against women and girls increased during this time. And some of our members are essential workers, and they had to go out in the community, but yet their children were home learning. And so ways in which our clubs were able to, the club members were able to help each other. I feel overall we have weathered it and have supported and found ways in which to communicate and to help.
Absolutely, thank you. So we're getting a little close to the end of our conversation, which is a bit disappointing for me because it's such a fabulous time. You have around a 40-year perspective of Zonta, since you joined as that young woman after the Amelia Earhart fellowships that you won. What do you think Zonta must do now to ensure that we remain relevant to young women in particular, and to truly hear their voices for what comes next for Zonta?
You know, serving as role models and sharing our experiences are still important to young people, because we faced hurdles And if we can lower that hurdle for someone else, it's important. I think some of the things that we look at today, because there are so many things going on, we talked earlier, the world was changing rapidly, there's uncertainty, that we need to look at things maybe in a more short-term basis than on the long term. And for young people, they have a lot of opportunities for engagement in different ways in a community, and where we can work with them with specific tasks for specific ways in which they can help, that they're not feeling like overwhelmed, but they have, I'm fine, I have 6 hours, you need 6 hours for this, I'm there for you. And I think it's listening to them, and we have to be good listeners. I've been at places where people will talk about what young people want, my generation, and I go, I need to hear directly from that young person, because we interpret what we hear. And if we're hearing it third person, so to speak, it's not the same as hearing it first person. And so we need to be that good listener of that young person. We need to say what our mission is. We need to show how we help women and girls and how their engagement, we would see their engagement, but we need to be that listener and hear from them directly.
Yes, it's about taking on board what they want, because they are the inheritors of the world that that we've been part of building, and they're the next generation, or the generation after the next generation. So in 2 weeks from today, you'll be in Hamburg, and you'll be well and truly immersed in a celebration, because I know international conventions are a celebration. You'll be immersed, you'll be around at least 1,400, 15 other Zonta members. What a fabulous end to a biennium. So what do you think's going to be next for you?
Well, my husband and I have a few plans. We've set aside some house projects. We've started expanding our vineyard a little bit, so it needs some work. But we want to do some exploring, traveling ourselves and visiting family we have not been together for a while. But I also have, my interest in education has continued. And it's primarily with my alma mater, the University of Missouri College of Engineering. And as we know, women are still underrepresented in engineering. So I felt it's very important for me to continue to share my experiences in the field of engineering and help women pursuing their goals. So I've accepted to be on the College of Engineering Dean's Advisory Council. And I also just accepted the role to be serving on their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Alumni Advisory Council. So I will be going back to Missouri periodically to be there with the university and to help shape some of the things that are happening at that college. And it was important for me because that's where I got my beginnings. And I wanted to continue to help the university. So education continues to be in the forefront, but family and relaxation will be one of the first things that I do.
A little bit of downtime, and if that's pruning in the vineyard, or planting in the vineyard, or picking in the vineyard, it'll be a good thing to be doing, depending on the season. Where do you think you'll get the next uplift in the power of your voice? Because a really big theme in our conversation today and back in January of last year was that power to be an advocate, the power to speak on behalf of, the power to take passion forward on behalf of projects. So where do you think that next uplift? I hear it will come in your work at the University of Missouri. But where else do you think you might have that uplift in your voice?
I think networking within the Zonta Amelia Earhart Fellows and with some of the other, the JMK and the Young Women in Public Affairs. For me, that networking around the world, it takes that world and brings it closer. And it's always been exciting when I hear about people going to conferences and they go, oh, you're an Amelia Earhart Fellow. Oh, I get to meet you. And so networking is one way that I want to stay engaged and inspired by the youth, by the young people, but also of my generation, because we have experiences to share. And so I look to continue
Lovely.
in that regard.
And I'm sure we'll see and hear a lot more of you in various places after the 29th of June or thereabouts after that.
Yeah.
So our conversation is coming to a close. So have you got any final thoughts to leave with our audience today?
Well, first, I want to say what an honor and a privilege it has been to serve as president of Zonta International and the Zonta Foundation for Women. During the last 2 years, my knowledge of Zonta has grown. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned yet was what happened. One of the things that we did this biennium was changing from Zonta International Foundation to officially the Zonta Foundation for Women. And I think that was an important thing for our organization. And so I'm very proud of that. But you know, it has strengthened the events of the last 2 years with the pandemic. They are a setback for women and girls, but I've also built on the strength of my commitment to give back to Zonta, to help and to move that needle forward again. And I feel like these 2 years has just strengthened that give back commitment. And I, again, put my vision out there that I would like to see us achieve gender equality in our lifetime. It's a big challenge out there, but let's be bold. Let's embrace that challenge. Let's fulfill our founder's vision, because together we can do it. And so I'm just inspired to continue. And I'm, again, just so honored to be able to have served as the Zonta International president for the last 2 years.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm honored to have worked with you in your role as international president. And I know everyone who engages in this program will feel likewise. And your story, your own personal story, is remarkable. It was remarkable back in the 70s. It's more remarkable now. And the woman you have become and the leader you have become is exemplified in your term. So a truly remarkable woman with a really powerful story. So thank you so much for your time with me today. And thank you for your huge commitment to our organisation, Zonta International. And speaking of young women, I will be in conversation with our youngest president in July, Sarah Diana Farage, from here in Queensland, Australia. And she's just 21 and already a president of a club here in Queensland, Australia. So that's the power of hearing the voice of our young women. So what a lovely way to, I guess, come out of your biennium into the next, hearing the voices of our young women for the world that we're trying to build. We've still got a few decades left to make this gender equality happen. So yes. I'm with you. Let's do our best to make it happen. So again, thank you. Enjoy Hamburg. Have an amazing celebration. And I look forward to talking with you soon. So to all of our remarkable guests watching today, I will see you again in July, at the end of July. So again, Sharon, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn.